Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedi Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our subject today is Dive Deep, O Mind. It's borrowed from the song actually that we just sang in the beginning. It's a Bengali song which Sri Ramakrishna was fond of singing. Taking the name of Kali, dive deep down, O mind, into the heart's fathomless depths, where many a precious gem lies hid. That's how it begins. There's another song about diving that Sri Ramakrishna sang, and this is how it goes. Dive deep, O mind, dive deep in the ocean of God's beauty. If you descend to the uttermost depths, there you will find the gem of love. Go, O mind, to seek the Vrindavan in your heart. So one is from the Shakta tradition, where the Divine Mother is the object of worship, and the second is from the Vaishnava tradition. And both speak about diving. And there's a lot of diving in the Ramakrishna's teachings as well. So here are these two examples we read in the Gospel of Ramakrishna. One occurs on page 674, and this is what Sri Ramakrishna says. There are some who do not want to dive. They say, won't we become deranged if we go to excess about God? Referring to those who are intoxicated with divine love, they say, these people have lost their heads. But they don't understand this simple thing. God is the ocean of Amrita, immortality. Once I said to Narendra is who later became Vivekananda, suppose there were a cup of syrup and you were a fly, where would you sit to drink that syrup? Narendra said, I would sit on the edge of the cup and stretch out my neck to drink it. Why? I asked. What's the harm of plunging into the middle of the cup and drinking the syrup? Narendra answered, then I should stick in the syrup and die. My child, I said to him, that isn't the nature of the nectar of Satchidananda. It is the nectar of immortality. People don't die from diving into it. On the contrary, people become immortal. Therefore, I say, dive deep. Don't be afraid. By diving deep in God, one becomes immortal. And there's this another one, quote from Ramakrishna from the Gospel. This comes on page 543. And this is what he says. One should learn the essence of the scriptures from the Guru and then practice sadhana. If one rightly follows spiritual discipline, then one directly sees God. The discipline is said to be rightly followed only when one plunges in. What will a person gain by merely reasoning about the words of the scriptures? Ah, the fools! They reason themselves to death over information about the path. They never take the plunge. What a pity. You may say, even though you dive deep, you are still in danger of sharks and crocodiles, of lust and anger. But dive after rubbing your body with turmeric powder. Then sharks and crocodiles will not come near you. The turmeric is discernment and renunciation. So again and again, we find this about diving and plunging. Now, I grew up in a small town in India. There wasn't any pool nearby, no river nearby, so I didn't really learn swimming at a young age. And even now, I try to stay away from water. I like walking along the Charles. I've never felt like plunging into it. And luckily, when I read about the gospel, I found that there's another kind of diving we can do. Not necessarily diving in water, but diving inside. And in Yoga Sutras as well, oftentimes the analogy given to the mind is that of a lake or water. It's a body of water. And so I thought this will be a good topic as we get ready before the summer break. And some of you might be actually diving and plunging. You may be involved in pond or places in and around your place. And so what does this diving mean? So when I was thinking about how to express about this inner diving, I thought a diagram might help. Because years ago, but almost 20 years ago, in the scripture class we used to have, I think, on Kathopanishad and some of these other topics. At that time I was younger also, and I had done a lot of slides and visualizations, and I haven't done it now for 15, 20 years. But yesterday somehow I felt inspired, and I said, okay, let me try to do one diagram to kind of, sometimes it becomes easier, these topics get a bit abstract, to have some visual support to see it. So I made one effort at drawing what that inner diving would be. And so that's the reason I'm here now and not there, so that the screen is now going to come down, and then let's see how it goes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Is it more or less visible to all of you? Very well. So first of all, a disclaimer, the mind is not oval-shaped. But the moment you kind of draw a kind of a diagram like this, you need to give form. So, but this kind of gives us a little bit of an idea about what this inner diving is. As you can see, there are these basically 3 sections to it. First is the conscious mind, the unconscious, clear mind, and so on. And then we'll briefly see what that diagram means. First of all, the world that we experience. You can see on the top, there is the senses: sight, smell, taste, touch, and sound. So all of the world that we have been experiencing right from the time we were born really comes to us through the senses, and basically these 5 senses. Sometimes people wonder about whether miracles do occur in life. And the greatest miracle actually is that we see the world the way we see it. Because what the senses take in are really these different frequencies. So frequencies of light and color and form and taste, and if you just see the frequencies, how do all these different sound and other frequencies go in, and how they are manipulated, and we suddenly see this 3-dimensional world outside, is probably one of the greatest miracles. One analogy that often comes to mind is most of us nowadays use a computer. Well, even if you don't use a computer, you're carrying a smartphone. That is a kind of a small computer in itself. And we use these gadgets, most of us not really even knowing what's really happening inside. They appear pretty simple. You just press a button, or nowadays just look at it, and it does a lot of things. If we open the hardware, we might see some smaller parts. Most of us, again, won't be able to figure out what's what. But even beyond the hardware, there is the software, which is much more subtle. And essentially, that code, maybe only those who are expert at that probably might be able to figure out what it is. It's millions and millions of lines of code, which in itself would be just total gibberish to those of us who don't know what it is. But it is that subtle gibberish that suddenly brings your computer to life. You can read, you can listen to music, you can draw, you can do so many things. This is a little bit like that. What the senses take in is in some sense kind of a gibberish, just different frequencies. But somehow they all get processed in some magical way inside, and we see the world. And so the first part of it, the conscious mind, the one with the kind of a dull blue background, the top portion, that's the mind we are mostly in most of our lives. And that's how the world comes to us through the senses. Oh, I have a pointer here. Yes. See, the world comes to us through the senses, and this is the conscious mind we mostly live in. But then, very quickly, we realize there are a lot of things that come in our mind which don't come from the outside world. The questions can come, all the thoughts and feelings and the desires that come to me, they are not floating about anywhere outside in the world. They seem to be coming from inside me. And so, therefore, in the mind, there is really this basement. And the basement of the mind probably is even larger than this living room, which is upstairs. And so, all of these hidden things inside of us, and they're called unconscious because most of the time we are not conscious of it. What is there? It's a little bit like if you have never been inside your basement for a long time or to your garage, then oftentimes you forget what's there. And some people want to avoid going there because there's so much junk, and then you are reminded of how much work needs to be done there. So most of us just live in the living room, which is kind of, as far as possible, neat and tidy and clean. And so the desires that come in our heart really all come from the unconscious. They are not coming from outside. And when you pass by a Starbucks and if a desire for coffee comes, that desire for coffee is not coming from the Starbucks outside. The Starbucks may be just a trigger, but the desire itself starts from inside. So you see this a large black strip here, and that indicates where all the past impressions of the mind are stored. And so what are the past impressions? So let's say if you have been to Starbucks several times in the past, then and you have drunk a lot of coffee there, then every time you drink a cup of coffee, a coffee seed is stored here. Now it's not as if we just have coffee seeds. We have done all the actions that we do and all the thoughts that we think. Even thinking is an activity. It's a mental activity. So there is physical activity and there is mental activity. Every action done by either by the body or the mind produces really two results. One is, most of the time, it either produces joy or pain in terms of experience. But a more subtle effect is every action creates a seed, and that seed gets accumulated here. In this way, in our mind, since the body, if you believe in rebirth, every birth we get a new body. But every birth we don't get a new mind. The mind is more subtle, it's more lasting. So the mind that you and I have is the mind that has been with us for much longer. It has been with us even before we were born. The mind is what provides the continuation with our prior existence and future existence. And so the mind is carrying the seeds of not only the actions and thoughts we have thought in this life, but in all of our previous lives. So it's huge. And so what really happens is, suppose you have lots of coffee impressions here. I'm just giving, so coffee is only one example. Don't think it's all about coffee. Although for some people, it is all about coffee. So there are lots of these coffee impressions here. And maybe you are gone to your friend and they're brewing coffee, and just that smell you get from these senses. You either get a smell of coffee from outside, or from your sight, you see a Starbucks outside. That provides a trigger for this coffee impression to then wriggle itself up. It's almost like a pot of boiling water. After some time, the bubbles start coming from the bottom. So when the desire actually starts from here, it's pretty weak. But as it travels all the way up, it gets pretty strong. The problem is, until it reaches this point, we're not even aware of it because it's in the unconscious and we haven't gone into the basement yet. And so we become aware of it only when it crosses this line, comes into the conscious mind. Oftentimes we find it difficult to resist desire because this is such a long journey it makes. By the time the desire comes here, it's become pretty strong. And then it's not necessarily that we will have to do whatever the desire comes. What we need at this point is then a strong willpower. A willpower to then examine every desire and say, is it good for me or not good for me? Will it make me stronger? Will it make me weaker? Will it take me closer to my goal or will it make me forget my goal? So depending on that, if my willpower is strong, stronger than the power of the desire, the willpower can say no. Right now, if you feel like drinking coffee, and then the desire may be very strong, but then you might think, oh, it's probably not a good idea in the middle of a lecture to suddenly get out and drink a cup of coffee. So your willpower is saying no to it. Now, when you say no to it, what happens to that desire which comes? It again goes back. It says, oh, nobody wants me, and just kind of feel dejected a little bit, and then falls again. It doesn't disappear. You haven't destroyed it. But by saying no to it, the principle is this. Every time a desire comes into the heart, and every time you say no to it, you make it a little bit weaker. Every time you say yes to it and then act upon it, then that desire gets stronger. And then, of course, you act upon it, then you are created one more impression. And so, just by the simple law of probability, what kind of desires will spring in our heart will depend on what kind of impressions are there. So the demographic of these subtle impressions here, it pretty much determines at least the probability of what kind of desires are more likely to spring in our heart. Now, as I've often said, desires sometimes get demonized in the religious literature as if desires themselves are bad, which is not true. Desires are just desires. Desires are impulses wanting us to do something. Now, that doing can be in our own interest. I mean, a desire to pray, a desire to meditate, a desire to help other people, a desire to study, a desire to succeed in life. These are good desires. There is no reason why we should say no to them. But then there are other desires which could be weakening to me physically or mentally or emotionally, and I must be that strong to say no to that. So while the stuff that is already here now, eventually we have to deal with it somehow. But the first thing to do, as they sometimes, any of you would have heard say, if you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is to stop digging. In the same way, yes, if this is the framework, then what is in our control now, immediate control, is what kind of impressions I want to create in my mind going forward. We know that it's not so easy to just get rid of the junk in our home. We keep on postponing it. But at least it's a little bit easier than removing the junk from our mind. At least removing the junk from home, you can hire people to come and do it for you. But the junk in our own mind, we have to do it ourselves. No one else can do it for us. And therefore, the first thing to do is that going forward, that I'm consciously going to do only things that are positive, strong, healthy. I'm going to think thoughts that are positive, strong, healthy. Because that way, I'm then increasing the impressions in my mind which will be positive, strong, and healthy. And it might take a little time, but changing the demographic of these impressions, which are good and bad, pleasant and unpleasant, all kinds of, it's a mixed bag. But changing its demographic is in our control. Eventually, all the yogas, whether it's Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, they show different methods of how to get rid of this. Because below this is what I'm just calling clear mind. And it's an analogy, I think, I don't know whether I mentioned it on a Sunday or a Wednesday, so it's all getting mixed up in my mind now. But as I said, even when you think of the mind as a body of water, it's not, generally, if it's a small body of water, the characteristics you see in one side may be not different from the characteristic in another side. But it's a huge body of water. Think like Lake Michigan or something like that. Then you can't say that every part of Lake Michigan will be as clear or as unclear as every other part. That in a huge bodies of water, you might find some sections are, oh, you want to do swimming? Go to that end of the lake. You'll find clear water there. Don't go to the southern side or northern side or wherever, which is the water isn't good. So we know that some places the water is clear, some places it is not. That's a little bit of a case in our own mind as well. That there is a section in our own minds, every one of us, which is very clear. And there is this other section, which is really these two sections, the unconscious and conscious, not so clear. It's filled with all this. Conscious mind is filled with all these impressions coming from the world. But this clear mind, deep down, is free from all of that. Sometimes you see these those who are divers, kind of to go deep sea diving or ocean diving. It's only on the top that you have all these ripples and waves and a lot of disturbance. When you go deep and deep and deep, if you go deep right to the bottom of the Atlantic or something, then you'll find it's pretty clear. There isn't much disturbance there. It's pretty still. And so this plunging or diving that we read about in the teachings of these great ones, the songs that are written on it, is really plunging in our own mind. Because the way to go to the spirit, the divine in our heart, we go to this golden part here below. At least imagine that it is golden. So let's think about the kind of challenges we face in meditation. So we sit for meditation, and most of our lives we have led here, and all these sight, smell, taste, all these things are coming in, and meditation really means we want to go here, and we are kind of most of the time engaged with this. And so what we generally try to do is we say, I'm going to close my eyes. So as far as it's possible, I'm going to stop this one sense of sight. Generally, we don't want to sit in a room with any offensive smell. So sometimes people might light a little bit of an incense or something so that I don't get distracted by any offending smells. Generally, it's a good idea not to be eating while you're meditating. And also, oftentimes people have found it useful that for prayer and meditation, not to wear very tight-fitting clothes, because again, the sense of touch, which is so all-pervasive, all over our body. So the less we are impacted by the sense of touch, the easier it will be then to think of the divine. And then sound. As far as it's possible, thank goodness we nowadays have a noise-canceling phones, but otherwise we try to find a quiet spot. So what we are trying to do in a sense, that this door, which seems to be open all the time to the world around, as far as it is humanly possible, we try to close this down. Now, what are we going to do? Because this is closed on mostly. And that's the time then, all these thoughts and memories from past keep on coming. So sometimes we have gotten so used to dealing with the world, people find that that's kind of become our default state of mind. So people find that, most of the time I'm calm. Calm in the sense, I'm dealing with the world, but that's what I'm accustomed to. But the moment I sit for meditation, all kinds of weird thoughts and memories I'm troubled by. So people find that meditation can be more troubling than not meditating. There are people who have sometimes said, before I started taking meditation seriously, I was a happy person. I was so calm and peaceful. And now that I'm meditating, all these, God knows from where these thoughts are coming. No, God doesn't have to know. We know from where they are coming. It's all coming from here, from our own basement. And so that's the challenge that many of us experience, that when we shut ourselves off as much as it is possible from the external world, we have to deal with the unconscious. But our goal is to go down in this clear mind and think of the divine, think of the Atman, the spirit, the God within us. And so this is where we try to then plunge into this lake. This is the big barrier. But as I said, these impressions are another mixed bag. There are some impressions here which are helpful to us. Impressions which take us, which urge us to reach the ideal, which urge us to go closer to God, which are supporters of our quest for spiritual life. So if you're kind of good at diving, good at plunging, you might be able to not completely eliminate this barrier, but dive in a skillful way, and some of these helpful, positive impressions might make way for you and kind of dip into this part of the mind a little bit, even if for a second or two or three. And that's what sometimes we experience in meditation. Yes, we are struggling all the time, all kinds of thoughts are coming, it's a constant battle inside. Yes, but then at some occasions, on some days, we feel very calm, and then suddenly, it could be a very tiny fraction of a moment, we just feel a kind of stillness, a kind of a sense of transcendence, a sense of being calm in the presence of, sometimes we are not even able to express in whose presence, but you just feel different and you feel happy. So that's what happens when we are able to plunge deep enough, not get stuck here, and kind of just go into the clear mind. Now, oftentimes in the beginning, we can't stay here for a long time. We just kind of just take a dip and then again come and say, oh, again, I'm here. Then again, if you're strong enough, then again try to take a dip. And then this kind of going up and down, and then sometimes people get exhausted. And sometimes after a few minutes, people fall asleep because you're so tired dealing with all this stuff going on inside, again going, and then if you haven't had any rest, then it's, of course, meditation itself feels like an invitation to sleep. But even if you have been alert, sometimes this kind of an inner plunging and trying to go can be exhausting. And so the important thing during prayer and meditation is to remain as alert as possible, not get discouraged. Yes, it's tough, but we have to deal with it. Now, one way that can help us in our practice is, now, as I said, in most cases, this conscious part, this living room is pretty small. The unconscious is a pretty huge space in the mind. Now, the more I try to live in an alert way, try not to do anything in my life mechanically, what I'm really doing is actually I'm encroaching into this basement. Think about it this way, that yes, you have a lot of stuff in your garage or in your basement, and you sooner or later you just think, someday I have to deal with it. Now, it may not be possible to just say, I'm just going to finish it in half an hour. Most of the time, you can't finish it in half an hour. But what some people might say is, depending on the time that's available to me, I'm going to every day just clean a little bit of it, a small little portion. So some progress is better than simply endless planning. And so every day, if I say, I'm going to try to be alert, yes, I'm still going to be forgetful most of the time. It's a habit I have acquired over decades and over lives, maybe. But I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do everything with alertness in life. Then what happens is this conscious mind becomes larger and larger. This unconscious becomes smaller and smaller. And as I said that this samskaras or the mental impressions or the tendencies in the mind, in the path of bhakti, in the path of devotion, it is often said that it's God's grace that helps us eliminate these. In the path of knowledge, sometime in Jnana Yoga, they say that just as fire burns fuel to ashes, so similarly, it's the fire of knowledge, the light of knowledge that is able to eliminate these impurities. In the path of Raja Yoga, they say it's the willpower, the purity of mind that we get through the practices of yama, niyama, the restraint of the mind, the restraint of the senses. And some of these, we studied in the last several months about these 4 basic practices in Vedanta. That if we keep on practicing them as best we can, then what we are really doing is we are actually eliminating. First, we need to just weaken these tendencies, and weakening them is by saying no every time every time a desire which is not in my self-interest, something that is weaken me physically, mentally, or emotionally, I'm going to say no to it. And every time I say no, I weaken it. And once you weaken it, it's easy to kill it. It's very difficult to kill someone who is too strong. So first is, don't feed that person. And then gradually you can kill it. Sometimes people say, what about mercy? And in Vedanta, teachers have often said, yeah, mercy, being merciful is great. But that which is an obstacle, that which is preventing you from going there, no mercy. Just kill it. Because all the evil, all the bad tendencies we have, they have to be destroyed. And then the question becomes, what happens to all the good tendencies that remain here? We don't want to destroy the good ones. And what these texts say is that the good tendencies can be transcended. So we eliminate evil and we transcend the good. Now, why do we need to transcend good? The examples often given are the being bound or being chained in a gold chain and with a rusted iron chain. We might say, oh, I would love to have a gold chain, but I'm still bound. So while a gold chain might be better than an iron chain, but if it's the chain that is binding me, eventually the goodness itself can be a bondage. And so the divine, although in a kind of a casual sort of way, people say God is good, God is love, and which at some level it makes sense. But then if you think about it philosophically, then good and bad, love and hatred are still a part of this polarized world in which we live. If we identify God with only what is good, only what is love, then we're still stuck with the problem. Then what about all this evil? What about all this hatred? And then, so the Vedanta teachers have often said that, yes, when we say God is not good, doesn't mean God is bad. It simply means God transcends the polarities of good and bad. That God transcends the idea of love and hatred. God is love itself. But to think of God as loving is, of course, good. But again, it's a very a human way of trying to communicate with the divine. But then the more you look at it this way, then you will see that at some point, when only the good seeds remain, we can transcend it. The difference between good and bad is simply this. Because there is this one argument that can come. Eventually, if you have to get rid of good and bad, transcend them both, then why do we need to take all the trouble to get rid of bad? Just transcend them straight away. And the problem is, we cannot transcend evil. Evil needs to be killed. We can transcend good. And the difference is this, that if someone commits a crime, they will be punished for it. If not in this world, in the other world. But you cannot say, oh, I did it, but I don't want my punishment. That doesn't work. On the other hand, if you do something good and you're being rewarded for it, you have a chance to say, I don't want that award. And there are people who have refused to accept the award that was given, and that was perfectly okay. So that's the difference between good and bad. In some sense, yes, that's the two ends of a polarized world, but good is something that can be transcended. And therefore, when only these good seeds remain, we can transcend them. And that's where then we come to this clear mind. Clear mind is the closest to the Atman. It's still a mind, but being closest to it, it reflects the effulgence, the divine effulgence more clearly here. So we could kind of look at, if you want to have a long-term plan for our spiritual life, one would be, first thing is, can I increase this area of my conscious mind? That in a way, it's kind of, think about it. There are lots of things we do every day, and which is good, we should do, and take an early morning shower and brushing your teeth and all of those, and then eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, all of that. But because we have been doing it over and over and over again, these things have become mechanical. Lots of time. The jobs that we do, they can become mechanical. We go at the same time at the office, and sitting at the same desk, more or less the same kind of work. And it is so easy to almost become like a machine without realizing that we have become like machines. Maybe some new things occur, even some little bit of something unusual occurs, and we feel, today this happened, and then we went to this new place, because the rest of the things are like just routine stuff. But becoming alert, becoming truly alert would mean not making anything routine in life. What it really means also is that there is nothing boring in life in some ways. If we look with a clear mind, nothing is boring. If we look at with this, we just say, it's the same old, because what are we going to get new things every day? So that's why they say, if you look at a tree and you see a tree, you have seen nothing. But if you look at a tree and you see there the miracle of God, then we have seen something. So if you look at the tree from here, you'll see a tree. If this is influencing, then you might remember all the trees you have seen in some other places from memories. But if you look at a tree with a clear mind, then you will see the presence of God there. So a long-term plan for our life would be, can I increase this, make this unconscious smaller and smaller? The basement can be as clean and welcoming as my living room is. And then dealing with these impressions. So gradually, the more my mind becomes conscious, you will see it improves the quality of our daily prayer and meditation. Because this is the most problematic. At least this, we are able to close it down to a certain extent, the world, going to a quiet room and all of that. But what about this? And so once we are able to deal with this unconscious, then we have access to the clear mind. And the question, and it does look in a completely opposite direction. But what happens to the world? I'm now going here. Then will this be there when I come up? It's almost like when you dive deep inside a pool, eventually you're going to come up. And you come up, you're going to see the world outside. It's not like you just go inside and then you don't know how to come up. So what happens? And does the world disappear? If I now say, learn how to plunge in, how to dive deep, I've taken care of most of these obstacles in the way, I've increased the area, most of my mind has become a clear mind. I'm now getting closer because this is the very transparent part of the mind. That's what Sri Ramakrishna meant when he said, pure mind, pure intellect, and pure spirit, pure Atman is one and the same thing. So at this point here, the line of demarcation between matter and spirit becomes very hazy. You don't know where matter ends and spirit begins. And so once I've dived deep and whole of my or most of my mind has become clear, what happens to the world? Will the world disappear? And the answer is no, it will not disappear, but you will see it in a completely different light. And that's what I meant earlier about when you see a tree, you will see a miracle of God. So those who have dived deep inside and have learned how to spend a long time in this clear mind, and this clear mind becomes larger and larger and larger, when these people then look at the world to the same senses haven't disappeared anywhere. There's sight, smell, taste, touch, sound. This world is encountered, the world will have changed. The world will have changed because we have changed. What we see outside is a reflection of what we are inside. Swami Vivekananda once said, sometimes people come, oh, it's a selfish world, everyone is terrible. And then Swamiji says, well, if it's a selfish world, if everyone is bad, what are you doing here? Why should you be a part of this world? Maybe a little bit of the selfishness, little bit of that terribleness is in you too. And so it's very humbling that if I see evil outside, the reason I'm able to see it, because the germs of that evil is in some way inside me. I mean, sometimes you might have seen when you're just walking in a garden or just in a park or somewhere, and there is a squirrel or some bird there. And you're not walking with a gun. You have no intention of killing those creatures. But no sooner you walk, they just run away. Why would they run away? I didn't want to kill them. Why are they feeling afraid? And one way this gets explained is, I may not have this kind of a very tangible desire to go and destroy them or anything, but the seeds of violence in a very subtle way are still present. Those seeds are still present here somewhere. And we may not even know, maybe God knows, in some life, even though we might have been really non-violent, peaceful people, but in a subtle form, those seeds may be still lurking in some corner of our basement. And that's why they say, that in fact, there is one, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, there is one aphorism. He says, ahimsayam pratisthayam vairatyagaha. That what does it mean to be established in the virtue of non-violence? Who is a truly non-violent person? And what they say is, a person who is completely established in non-violence, no one will be able to hold thoughts of violence in their presence. In fact, the yoga books say that even lions and tigers might come nearby and wouldn't want to hurt them. Birds and creatures might come and sit on their shoulders without feeling threatened. And we see that even if you read the life of Francis of Assisi, you just see how these birds and others, they felt fearless to come and do. So in some sense, it's possible to explain that phenomenon by saying maybe there's some of that peace and non-violence had become so much a part of his life. And so that's where we want to be, the clear mind. So when we go up again, through the same senses, when we look at the world gets divinized. We are able to see the divine present in everyone and in everything because we are able to see the divine present in our own heart. what we see outside is what is inside. That's why they often say the macrocosm and the microcosm are built on the same plan. And one simple example that we all know is that why is it that I don't need so much effort to look at people and say, these are all human beings? Why don't I need to study books and say, oh, I need to meditate that these are all human beings? I don't need to do any of that. Why am I able to see everyone effortlessly as human beings? Because I'm able to see myself effortlessly as a human being. Because I see myself as human, I'm able to recognize and accept everyone as human. But people and books and teachers keep on saying, God is our father, God is our mother. We are all children of God. And oftentimes, we look at the crowds and maybe those people whom we like, we say, oh, maybe that person is a child of God. But this other person, no. So why is it I'm not able to see children of God everywhere? Because when I look in my own heart, am I able to see a child of God here? So when my identity as a child of God becomes firmly entrenched, then I look out outside, I'll just see everywhere children of God. There is a story one of our Swamis used to often say when I was back in India. He said that when Jivan Mukta, an enlightened person, someone went and asked that Jivan Mukta, have you met any enlightened people? And he said, I just see enlightened people everywhere. Wherever I see, I just see enlightened. Because that person was enlightened, that person was seeing the same presence of the divine, sporting, smiling through every face, through every person. So the next time we feel annoyed with the world, annoyed with the people, better to look inside and say, why is there some kind of a seed of annoyance is in my own heart? If I want to make the world better, I should begin by making myself better. It's not just that charity begins at home. Everything begins at home. In fact, the world will be so much a better place if everyone started taking care of themselves, taking care of their own problems. The world has become more chaotic because everyone wants to take care of other people's problems, and because they don't want to deal with their own problems. The best way to not have to deal with oneself, to avoid oneself, to escape from this, this is the big deal. And the best way to not have to deal with this is to keep yourself busy with this all the time. People say, I'm so busy, I have no time to meditate. Of course, it's so much problematic. And so, yes, there are problems in the world which need solving. But it's helpful to recognize that the problems outside and the problems inside, they are connected in some way. If we find lack of peace in the world outside, then those people who are trying to bring about peace, they need to look in their heart and say, am I really peaceful? A bunch of disturbed people sitting together for peace negotiation, they cannot bring peace. And so, even in order for peace to succeed, the people who want to do it, they must be peaceful. If you want a neighborhood, a country, a group to be filled with love, everyone must look in their own heart and see, is there love here? Because only if it is here, then I don't even have to make an effort to become loving. If it is here, it will automatically come out. Otherwise, people have to kind of say, oh, what are the kind of things I must say so that I should appear it's very loving? What are the kind of things I need to do to show my love? We don't need to do anything. We don't need to say anything. All we need to do is to truly develop that love in our heart. We won't be able to stop it from manifesting through our speech, through our actions, through everything. And therefore, a call, that's in most Vedanta teachers, therefore say, look in the heart, dive deep inside. And the more I'm able to make headway here, the more I'm able to have access to this clear mind, that every time I pray, meditate, I'm able to dive deep enough to at least take a glimpse of it and be able to find the ability to stay longer here, that's the way to know that I'm making some progress. And so, as we get ready for the summer break, um, keep this diagram at the back of your mind and let's strive to take care of our basement, also the basement at your home and the garage. A summer break is a good time to take care of that, but also the basement in our own hearts. And then when we meet again in September after Labor Day, we'll all have a little bit of a larger, clear mind. That's the hope, that's the prayer. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhum.